Hello, and welcome to Speak English Today. I'm so glad you're here, because today's episode is a very personal one. It's about a challenge that completely changed my life, and it might just change yours too. Let me start with something I truly believe. English is not just a language. It's a bridge to opportunities. It connects us to people, places, and possibilities we could never reach otherwise. You see, I didn't grow up speaking English. I was raised in a small, close-knit community where English was barely used. Conversations were mostly in our local language, and English felt like this distant, complicated thing that only existed in school books or on TV. But deep down, I always knew that English mattered. I wanted to be able to express myself, to be heard, to understand the world beyond my neighborhood. I wanted to watch movies without subtitles, apply for better jobs, connect with people from different countries, and maybe even travel one day. And I realized that if I wanted to grow personally and professionally, I had to do something about. So I gave myself a challenge. For 90 days, I would speak only English. No matter what, no switching back when it got hard. No hiding behind. I don't know how to say that. Just full immersion. I knew it wouldn't be easy. My English was broken. I hesitated, I stumbled. I translated everything in my head before I said it. But I also knew this. If I didn't start, I'd never improve. So in this episode, I'm going to take you through that journey day by day, week by week. I'll share the fears I faced, the habits I built, the mistakes the first made, and the victories I celebrated. And by the end of this episode, I hope you'll see that you don't need perfect grammar or a fancy accent to speak English. You just need consistency, courage, and a willingness to grow. Let's begin. So why did I decide to do this, to commit to speaking only English for 90 days? The simple answer? Because I was tired of holding myself back. Tired of smiling and nodding in conversations because I couldn't find the words I wanted to. Say tired of feeling like the smartest version of me only existed in my native language, and that in English. I was a shadow of that person. I grew up in a close-knit community where English wasn't a part of daily life. We spoke our own language, and that was fine until it wasn't. As I got older, I started to notice how limited I felt in situations where English was necessary. I'd watch people speak so naturally online, in interviews, on YouTube, and I'd feel this strange mix of admiration and jealousy. Why can't I sound like that? Why do I freeze up every time someone asks me a question in English? I remember once trying to write an email for a job application. Just a short paragraph. But it took me over an hour. I kept second-guessing every word. Was it professional enough? Was the grammar okay? Did it even make sense? That was one of many moments when I realized this wasn't just about language anymore. This was about confidence. Because every time I avoided speaking English, every time I kept quiet in a meeting or ignored an opportunity to connect with someone, I was telling myself, "You're not good enough. You can't do this." And those small decisions were slowly shaping how I saw myself. It was affecting my career. 2. I had dreams, big ones. I wanted to grow professionally, maybe even work internationally one day. But let's be honest, most of the world communicates in English. The best jobs, the most inspiring content, the online courses, the thought leaders, they all operate in English. And if I wanted to be part of that world, I had to stop being a spectator. I had to learn how to speak, not just to pass a test, but to connect, to think, to express, to belong. And it hit me one day, almost like a whisper in my head. What if you just stopped avoiding it? What if, for 90 days, you gave yourself permission to mess up, but kept going anyway? At first, it sounded crazy. Speaking only English with my level? Was that even possible? But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I didn't need a perfect plan or a fancy tutor. What I needed was immersion. I needed to live in English, eat with it, think with it, laugh, struggle, cry with English by my side. And I knew it wouldn't be comfortable. But I also knew this. Comfort is the enemy of growth. There was another moment I want to share, one that really pushed me over the edge. I was in a group setting, and everyone was taking turns sharing their thoughts on something important. I had an idea, a good one, and I wanted to say it, but the words just wouldn't come. I was afraid I'd get stuck or say something wrong, so I stayed silent. Later, someone else said the exact same thing I'd been thinking, and they were praised for it. Everyone nodded in agreement, and I just sat there, quietly kicking myself. That moment stung. It was like the universe was showing me, right then and there, your voice matters, but no one will hear it if you don't speak. And that's when I made the decision. Not because I was ready, but because I was done waiting to be ready. So I told myself, for 90 days, I'll speak only in English. I'll allow myself to sound awkward. I'll get things wrong. I'll laugh at my own mistakes. And I'll keep showing up. Because I didn't want to live a life where I was constantly holding back. I wanted to step into who I could become. If I just gave myself the chance. This challenge wasn't about becoming fluent overnight. It was about choosing courage over comfort. And slowly, day by day, I would learn that English wasn't something to fear. It was something to grow into. Day 1, facing the fear. Day 1 was brutal. I woke up feeling nervous but determined. I had made a promise to myself, 90 days of speaking only English. I thought I was ready. I wasn't. That first day humbled me. I tried to speak English from the moment I opened my eyes. I greeted my family in English, and they looked at me like I'd lost my mind. I tried to reply to a text in English, and it took me 20 minutes to write one sentence. Every word felt foreign in my mouth. I kept second-guessing everything. I'd say something, then immediately think, was that right? Did I just embarrass myself? And I can't even count how many times I opened Google Translate that day. I was glued to it, typing, translating, copying, and pasting. It became my safety net, and also a crutch I hated depending on. Emotionally, it felt like I was standing on stage, under a spotlight, with no script. I was so self-conscious. I judged every sentence I said. Every mistake felt like a personal failure, like I was proving to myself and everyone around me that I wasn't good enough. But here's what I realized. and it's something I held onto throughout the entire journey. Every mistake is progress in disguise. If I wasn't making mistakes, I wasn't learning. If I wasn't struggling, I wasn't stretching. And I reminded myself, this is what day one is supposed to feel like. Hard, messy, awkward. So instead of trying to be perfect, I focused on being intentional. I set 3 simple goals for myself that day. Nothing fancy. Just small steps I could actually complete. Greet someone in English, even if it was just good morning, or how are you? That alone felt like a win. Write one short journal entry about my day in English. I didn't worry about spelling or grammar. I just wrote what I could. Use 5 new English words and sentences. I looked up 5 useful words, wrote down their meanings, and made little sentences with them throughout the day. And guess what? I didn't do any of those things perfectly, but I did them. And that made all the difference. Looking back, I think day one taught me the most important lesson of all. Fluency doesn't begin with words. It begins with courage. The courage to open your mouth and try. The courage to get it wrong in front of others. The courage to keep going, even when it feels like you're failing. That night, as I lay in bed, I didn't feel fluent, but I felt proud because I had started, and that's always the hardest part. Week 1. Creating a system. After surviving day 1, I knew I couldn't keep going without a plan. Waking up every day and just trying my best wasn't going to work. I needed structure, something to guide me, something to hold me accountable when my motivation faded. And trust me, it did fade. That's when I sat down with a notebook and said to myself, if I'm going to make this work for 90 days, I need a routine. So I broke each day into 3 simple parts: morning, afternoon, and evening. Nothing overwhelming. Just small, focused blocks of time that made English feel like a part of my lifestyle, not some impossible task I had to force. Morning. Input mode. In the mornings, I focused on listening English in. No pressure to respond. I started each day by playing an English podcast or YouTube video while brushing my teeth or making breakfast. But I didn't just let it play in the background. I turned on subtitles and paid attention. Some mornings I listened to motivational speakers. Other times, it was beginner English channels or short TED Talks. Whatever I chose, the goal was the same. Immerse myself in the rhythm, the sounds, the phrasing of the language. At first, I didn't understand everything. That was frustrating. But I learned to pause, rewind, replay. I'd even repeat certain phrases out loud to train my mouth and ears to move together. Afternoon? Output mode. In the afternoons, it was time to speak. This was the hard part. Speaking still made me anxious, so I started simple. If I didn't have someone to practice with, I spoke to my mirror. Yes, it felt ridiculous at first, but it worked. I'd pretend I was having a conversation, ask myself questions, and answer them aloud. What did you eat today? What do you like to do in your free time? Describe your room. Sometimes I recorded myself speaking and played it back. Cringe-worthy at first, but so helpful. I could hear my weak spots. I could track my progress, and on good days, I'd text or call a friend who was also learning English, and we'd agree to only speak in English for a few minutes. No switching back. No excuses. Evening. Reflection and review. Evenings were about slowing down and reviewing. I'd write a short journal entry in English. Nothing complicated, just a few sentences about what I did that day, what I struggled with, what I learned. Then I'd review the new words or phrases I came across during the day. I kept a little notebook of words I learned, tried, or finally understood. I'd write them down, along with a sentence or two of my own using them. This became one of my favorite parts of the routine. It felt like I was building a personal dictionary. By the end of week 1, something amazing happened. I was in the middle of journaling, and I realized I had written an entire paragraph without translating in my head. No switching back and forth, no panic, just writing in English, freely, naturally. It wasn't perfect. I'm sure the grammar was a little messy, but that didn't matter, because in that moment, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Confidence. That small win gave me the motivation to keep going, and it helped me lock in a mindset that carried through every struggle. It's not about perfection. It's about consistency. That became my mantra. Say it with me. It's not about perfection. It's about consistency. Because that's the truth. Fluency doesn't come from doing one big thing perfectly. It comes from doing small things imperfectly, but every single day. So if you're listening to this right now, and you're thinking about starting your own English challenge, here's what I'll tell you. Don't worry about getting everything right. Worry about showing up. Set a simple structure: morning input, afternoon speaking, evening review, and just start. That's what I did in week 1, and it changed everything. Week 4, stepping outside the comfort zone. By the time I reached week 4 of my 90-day English challenge, something began to shift inside me. The daily routine I had built, listening, speaking to the mirror, journaling, was starting to pay off. I could form basic sentences without freezing. I wasn't fluent, not even close, but I was starting to feel a bit more comfortable with English. And that's exactly when I realized something important. Comfort is not the goal. Comfort means you're playing it safe. And I didn't start this challenge to play it safe. I started it to grow. And growth begins where comfort ends. That realization pushed me into one of the most intimidating, awkward, and transformative parts of this journey. Speaking to real people, strangers, in English. Let me tell you about the very first time I spoke English with a stranger. I was at a local convenience store, and I'd practiced one sentence in my head the whole way there. Hi, do you have bottled water? It's such a simple question, but to me, it felt like climbing a mountain. I must have repeated it to myself 20 times. I rehearsed the pronunciation, the tone, the rhythm, just to make sure I didn't mess it up. When I finally got to the counter and said it out loud, my voice was shaking. My palms were sweaty. And for a moment, the cashier looked at me, confused. I panicked. My brain wanted to switch back to my native language, but then she smiled and said, Yes, right over there. And just like that, I had done it. A real conversation. A real response. No translation app. No Google help. Just me and English. That tiny interaction gave me a huge confidence boost. It showed me that speaking English in the real world, while terrifying, I started to push myself more. I joined a few online English-speaking groups, forums, voice chats, even a beginner conversation circle on Zoom, where people from all over the world were practicing English together. At first, I kept my camera off. I barely spoke, but I listened. And little by little, I began to participate. There's something powerful about being in a group of people who are all struggling, learning, growing together. No one judged me when I mispronounced a word. No one laughed when I made a grammar mistake. In fact, many of them were just as nervous as I was. Eventually, I built up enough courage to join a local meet group in my city, just a small gathering of language learners. At a cafe, walking into that meet was one of the scariest things I've done in my adult life. I almost turned around at the door, but I didn't. And that night, I had my first real conversation in English that lasted more than 5 minutes. I remember laughing, asking questions, answering them. Slowly, awkwardly, but genuinely. That night, I went home buzzing with energy. Not because I spoke perfectly, far from it, but because I had connected. I had used English to connect with people, to be seen, to share my thoughts even if they were simple. Around this time, something else started happening, almost without me realizing it. I was no longer translating everything in my head. At first, I had to hear a sentence in English and quickly switch it into my native language and come up with a response, translate it again, and finally speak. But now, I noticed that sometimes I was just thinking in English. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't happen all the time. But it happened. I'd be walking down the street, and I'd describe what I was seeing in English. I'd talk to myself while cleaning, or rehearse what I wanted to say before a call, or dream up conversations all in English. Felt like my brain was rewiring itself. That was one of the biggest milestones for me. Not grammar, not vocabulary, but that shift in mindset. Thinking in English meant I was finally letting go of my fear and trusting myself with the language. But make no mistake, this stage was hard. It was full of awkward moments, long pauses, and self-doubt. I mispronounced beach once and said something completely inappropriate. I'll let you imagine that one. I forgot simple words in the middle of conversations. I laughed when I didn't understand what someone said, just to hide the embarrassment. But here's the thing. Every one of those awkward moments made me stronger, because every time I survived an uncomfortable situation, I became a little more confident, a little more fluent, a little more free. I started to believe that fluency isn't something you wait for. It's something you build, one uncomfortable conversation at a time. If you're listening to this right now and you've been avoiding speaking to others in English because it scares you, I get it. I've been there. It's hard. But it's also where the magic happens. You'll never be ready. You just have to start, so step outside your comfort zone. Say something, even if it's messy. Ask a question, even if your voice shakes, because I promise you, what's waiting on the other side is worth it. The challenges had almost made me quit by the time I had made it past the first few weeks of my 90-day English challenge. Things looked pretty good on the outside. I was practicing daily, building routines, even speaking to strangers in English. But what people didn't see, what I didn't even fully admit to myself at first, was the emotional roller coaster happening behind the scenes. Because the truth is, there were moments when I almost quit. Let me start with the big one. Imposter syndrome. Even when I was improving, I still felt like a fraud. Like I didn't really belong in English-speaking spaces. I kept thinking, I don't sound like a native speaker. I make too many mistakes. I'm just pretending to be fluent. I would hear others speak so naturally, so fluently, and I'd shrink. Suddenly, all the progress I'd made felt like nothing. I'd start comparing my journey to theirs, and telling myself that I'd never get to that level, so what's the point? It was like my mind was stuck in this loop of, you're not good enough. You'll never be good enough. But here's what I had to learn. Sometimes the hardest part of language learning isn't the language itself. It's the voice in your head telling you you can't do it. Then came the plateau effect. Have you ever worked so hard on something, only to feel like you're not making any progress? That's what weeks 5 and 6 felt like for me. I was still doing the work, listening, speaking, journaling, but it felt like nothing was changing. My sentences still felt slow. I still forgot basic words. I wasn't having any breakthrough moments. I thought, maybe I've reached my limit. Maybe this is as good as I'll ever get. I was stuck in this fog where motivation was low. Progress felt invisible, and everything felt harder than it should be. And then the self-doubt crept in. I started questioning everything. Why am I even doing this? What's the point of putting in all this effort? Will I ever feel truly confident in English? Or am I just wasting time pretending I can change something that's already too late? These weren't just passing thoughts. They were heavy. Some days I didn't even want to open my notebook. I'd skip my podcast, avoid conversations, and go back to the comfort of silence. But here's what kept me from quitting. 1. Reminders. I wrote sticky notes and stuck them on my wall, on my mirror, even on my phone screen. Notes that said things like, fluency is built, not born. Progress, not perfection. The only way to fail is to stop. Whenever I felt like giving up, I read those notes and reminded myself why I started. 2. Even on the worst days, I forced myself to write something. Even just a few lines. Today was hard. I didn't practice much, but I'm still here. That habit kept me grounded. It was a way to track my journey, even when the wins were small. And when I looked back on my older entries, I could actually see how far I had come. I could read my own growth. That gave me hope. 3. Talking to myself with kindness. This one sounds strange, but it was life-changing. I started treating myself like a friend, instead of beating myself up for messing up a sentence. I'd say, hey, it's okay. You're learning. You showed up. You tried. I stopped demanding perfection from myself and started celebrating effort. Because at the end of the day, Showing up is braver than staying silent. If you're listening to this and you're in that messy middle part of your English journey where you're working hard but not seeing results, please hear me. It's normal to feel stuck. It's normal to doubt yourself. And it's okay to be tired. But don't quit. The breakthrough usually comes right after the breakdown. And the voice in your head saying, "You can't," is just fear in disguise. Keep going. Keep showing up. Because the version of you on day 90, they're going to be so proud you didn't give up. Week 8. Week 8. Confidence over perfection. By week 8, I began to notice something that felt like a quiet, internal shift. It wasn't loud or dramatic. There wasn't some big aha moment. It was subtle. I was no longer speaking with a constant fear of making mistakes. I wasn't overthinking every sentence. I wasn't trying to perform when I spoke. I was just talking. And for someone who had spent most of their life holding back, that was everything. The way I spoke was changing. My sentences were getting longer, not because I was forcing them to be, but because I could now hold a thought from beginning to end without falling apart in the middle. I could describe things in more detail. I could explain my opinions. I could even tell short stories. That was a huge milestone for me. To not just answer questions in English, but to talk about my day, share a funny moment, or express how I was feeling. And do it comfortably. The rhythm of my speech also felt different. In the beginning, every sentence was choppy and hesitant. I'd stop halfway through a thought to check if I was saying it right or to search for a better word. Now, there was a flow. I was starting to speak with a more natural rhythm. My thoughts and words were finally moving in sync. I wasn't just learning to speak English anymore. I was learning to own it. The secret? I slowed down. One of the most powerful decisions I made around this time was to speak slower. I used to think fluency meant speed. That speaking quickly made me sound more native. So I rushed my words, pushed my thoughts forward before I was ready, and often ended up confusing both myself and the person I was talking to. But around week 8, I told myself, what if I gave myself permission to slow down? And that changed everything. Speaking slowly gave me space. Space to breathe. Space to think. Space to find the right word without panicking. I noticed that when I slowed down, I actually made fewer mistakes. People understood me better. And more importantly, I understood myself better. It was no longer about trying to impress anyone. It was about being understood, about making genuine connections through language, not perfect performances. Simplicity became my superpower. Another important shift that happened during this stage was learning the value of simplicity. In the early weeks, I tried to sound advanced. I thought big words and complex grammar would make me sound more fluent. So I'd say things like, I am attempting to familiarize myself with a wider range of lexical items, instead of just saying, I'm trying to learn more words. See the difference? Trying to sound smart was exhausting, but sounding simple? That was freeing. I learned that native speakers don't always use fancy language. They use common, clear, straightforward phrases that get the point across. So I started focusing on those. Instead of elaborate vocabulary, I practiced everyday English, the kind you use in cafes, on the phone, in real conversations. And guess what? My confidence skyrocketed because for the first time, I could speak and actually be understood without stressing over grammar or memorizing complex phrases. Reviewing. My conversations helped more than any app. Another habit that helped me during this stage was something very simple but powerful. Reflecting on my conversations. Every evening, I would take a few minutes to review how I used English that day. Sometimes I'd write it down. Sometimes I'd just think about it while brushing my teeth. I'd ask myself, what did I say today that I felt good about? What confused me? Was there a word I couldn't remember? Is there something I wish I'd said differently? This self-review became my secret weapon. It helped me notice patterns. It helped me celebrate wins I would have otherwise missed. And it reminded me that every single conversation, no matter how awkward, was a lesson in progress. Even mistakes became something I looked forward to analyzing. Not in a negative way, but in a curious, growth-focused way. Like, that's why that didn't work. Okay, I'll try a different word next time. Real confidence is quiet. I used to think that confidence would feel like standing on a stage, being loud and sure of myself, dazzling everyone with perfect English. But that's not what it felt like for me. It felt like walking into a room and not panicking. It felt like being able to order food, ask a question, or introduce myself without rehearsing it 10 times. It felt like being able to speak and not apologize for how I spoke. Confidence wasn't loud. It was calm. It was quiet. It was steady. And that quiet confidence made me realize something that took me years to learn. Confidence comes before fluency. You don't wait until you're fluent to feel confident. You build confidence by using the English you have now, even if it's broken, even if it's basic, even if you're scared, because every time you speak, you become more of the speaker you want to be. So, if you're listening to this right now, and you're still stuck in the perfection trap thinking you're not good enough because your English isn't flawless, let me tell you this. You don't need perfect grammar. You don't need a native accent. You don't need fancy words. You need clarity, consistency, and the courage to keep speaking anyway. And I promise you, when you focus on connection over perfection, that's when you start to sound like the version of yourself you've been chasing all along. Day 90. Who I became. Day 90, I'll never forget it. I didn't wake up speaking perfect English. There was no magical transformation overnight. I still made grammar mistakes. I still forgot words. But something inside me had completely changed. Because by day 90, I realized something important. I wasn't fluent, but I was transformed. And in many ways, that mattered even more. That morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone I barely recognized, not because I looked different, but because I felt different. I had become someone who showed up, someone who kept going, even when it was hard, someone who chose progress over perfection every single day. The biggest change wasn't just in my vocabulary, it was in my identity. I had built new habits. English had become part of my daily life. I no longer had to force myself to listen to a podcast or practice speaking. I wanted to. My morning routine naturally included English audio. I'd journal in English without even thinking about it. When something funny happened during the day, my first thought was often in English. I'd whisper responses to myself during TV shows. I'd rehearse what I wanted to say out loud on walks, in the kitchen, even in my dreams. It wasn't something I did anymore. It was something I had become. Now, I don't just speak English, I think, live and dream in it. My mindset had shifted in the beginning. I thought learning English was about memorization, grammar rules, pronunciation drills. But by day 90, I knew better. English wasn't just a language. It was a lens, a mindset, a space where I could grow not just as a learner, but as a person. I stopped seeing mistakes as failure. I started seeing them as feedback. I stopped comparing myself to native speakers. I started measuring my growth against yesterday's version of me. And most of all, I stopped trying to be perfect and started trying to be real. That one shift changed everything. Because when I gave myself permission to be imperfect, I gave myself permission to improve. I had gained confidence. Before this challenge, I was scared to speak. I would avoid phone calls, skip social events, and hide behind text messages because I didn't trust my English. I start conversations. I ask questions. I joke. I laugh. I even make small talk. I don't freeze when someone speaks to me in English. I don't panic when I don't know a word. I just keep going. Because I know that confidence doesn't mean having all the answers. It means trusting yourself to figure it out. What English has unlocked for me. When I started this journey, I was doing it for myself. But what I didn't expect was how much it would open up my world. Since day 90, so much has changed. I've made new friends from all over the world, people I never would have met if I hadn't found the courage to speak. I've connected with mentors, joined international communities, and even helped others on their English journeys. I've landed new job opportunities, ones that required interviews and communication in English. I walked in with confidence I never had before. I've consumed books, podcasts, and ideas that have expanded how I think, not just about language, but about life. Learning English didn't just give me a skill, it gave me access. Access to the world. Access to relationships. Access to a bigger version of myself, who I am now. I'm not the same person who started this challenge. That person was full of fear. They doubted themselves. They questioned whether they were even capable of becoming fluent. But the person I am now, I still make mistakes. I still have things to learn. But I believe in myself, and I know that the biggest difference between people who learn and those who don't isn't intelligence. It's not talent. It's not even time. Consistency. It's grit. It's showing up when you'd rather quit. A message to you. If you're listening to this and you're at day 1 or day 10, or stuck somewhere in the messy middle, don't give up. You don't have to be great to start. But you do have to start to be great. Start small. Start scared. Start messy. But start, because one day, you'll look back and realize what I did. I wasn't fluent, but I was transformed. And maybe that transformation is what you were really looking for. All along tips for your own 90-day English journey. By now, you've heard the full story, how I went from barely speaking English to building confidence, rhythm, and connection over 90 days. But here's the truth that I want you to carry with you. You don't need to be special to do this. You just need to start. So, if you're ready to begin your own 90-day journey, or maybe you're already somewhere along the way and just feeling a little lost, this part is for you. Let me share with you the real tools that helped me. Not just the apps or the videos, but the habits, the mindset shifts, the hacks, and the heart behind it all. 1. Start small. Stay consistent. One of the biggest mistakes I made early on was trying to do too much too fast. I had all this motivation and thought I needed to go big. I'd write 50 vocabulary words in a notebook. I'd plan to study 2 hours every night. I'd create this perfect schedule on paper. And then, I'd fail to keep up because motivation fades. Life gets busy. And when our goals are too big, we start to feel like we're failing. But the day I made my goals smaller, everything changed. Just 5 minutes of speaking to myself in the mirror. Just one journal entry in English, even if it was just 3 sentences. Just one podcast episode during my commute. The secret? I didn't miss a day. And that daily practice, no matter how small, started to build momentum. So ask yourself, what's the tiniest step I can take today? Then do that. And do it again tomorrow. And again the next day. That's how real progress happens, not in leaps, but in steps. 2. Embrace the awkwardness. If I could give you just one piece of advice, it's this. Don't wait until you feel ready. Start while it's still messy. Talk to your plants. Talk to your mirror. Narrate your morning routine like you're on a cooking show. Now I'm pouring the cereal. Very carefully. I don't want to spill it like yesterday. Laugh at yourself. Make weird faces. Forget the words. Who cares? In those silly, awkward moments, you're actually doing some of your best learning because you're rewiring your brain to think in English, not just study it. And by the way, talking to yourself is not weird. It's smart. It's what actors do. It's what public speakers do. It's what language learners have been doing for decades. So please, let go of the idea that you have to sound polished. Real fluency doesn't start with perfection. It starts with courage. 3. Immerse yourself through listening. Before I could really speak comfortably, I had to listen. A lot. Listening is like training your ears to recognize the music of the language. Its rhythm, tone, pauses, and emotion. But here's the key. Don't just passively listen. Listen like you're a detective. When I listen to podcasts or YouTube videos, I asked myself, what are the patterns in their speech? What expressions do they use again and again? How do they pause? Where do they emphasize words? And I didn't understand everything. Not even close. But over time, my ears got better. Words started to feel familiar. Phrases started to stick. And eventually, I began to think in those phrases. So turn your environment into an English zone. Switch your phone to English. Play music in English. While you cook, watch your favorite movie with, and then without subtitles. Let your mind soak in. The language, like tea leaves steeping in hot water, fluency isn't built in silence. It's built in sound. 4. Let simplicity be enough. One of the most freeing realizations I had was this: you don't need fancy words to sound fluent. You need familiar ones that work. In the beginning, I'd try to use complex vocabulary, to sound smarter, but it only made me hesitate more. So instead, I learned to say things simply, clearly, directly. And you know what? People understood me better. I felt more confident. And I had more real conversations. So ditch the thesaurus for now. Use what you know. And trust that your fluency will grow with your clarity, not your complexity. 5. Celebrate everything, seriously. Did you say a full sentence today without stopping? Celebrate. Did you talk to someone even if it was just to ask for directions? Celebrate. Did you understand a joke in English for the first time? You better celebrate that too. Because here's the truth. Language learning is full of invisible progress. You don't always feel it. But that doesn't mean it's not happening. Celebrate not just your victories, but your effort. You showed up. You practiced. You stayed committed, even when it felt like you weren't improving. That deserves recognition. Buy yourself a coffee. Post your progress. Write down the moment. Share it with someone. Because every celebration is a reminder. I'm growing. I'm getting better. I'm becoming someone new. Final thought. You are capable. If you're still listening, you're already different from the person you were before this episode started. You're hungry, curious, hopeful. You want more from yourself, and that's beautiful. So here's your permission. There is no perfect English. There is only your English. Make it real. Make it yours. Use it to connect, to express, to grow. One sentence at a time. One awkward conversation at a time. One brave day at a time. You don't have to wait. Your 90-day journey can start right now. And I promise you this. The person you'll become by day 90, they're going to thank you before we wrap up. I want to leave you with one final reminder. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. That quote carried me through the hardest parts of my journey. Through the days I wanted to give up. Through the moments I felt stuck, embarrassed, or not good enough. And now, looking back at those 90 days, I'm so glad I started. I didn't have a private tutor. I didn't pay for expensive courses. I didn't live in an English-speaking country. I had nothing fancy. Just a notebook, my phone, and a decision. A decision to show up. A decision to believe that even 5 minutes up. So if you're sitting there wondering, can I really do this? Let me tell you, yes, you can. If I could do it with no special tools, No perfect accent, no shortcuts. So can you. Your version of this journey might look different. Your wins might be quieter. Your timeline might be longer. But if you start something inside, you will begin to shift. You'll stop learning English just to pass tests or impress people. You'll start using it to express who you are. And that version of you? That version is already waiting on the other side of day 90. So take the first step. Whisper that sentence. Write that journal entry. Listen to that podcast. Speak even if your voice shakes. And hey, I want to hear from you. If this episode helped you, inspired you, or gave you the push you needed to begin, I'd love for you to DM me. Tell me where you're starting from. Tell me your 90-day goal. Or just say, I'm in. You don't have to do this alone. Let's grow together. Thank you for listening to Speak English Daily. I'm proud of you.